Hello everyone and welcome to our presentation. We are so honored to speak here and share the topic with you. First of all, I'd like to introduce our group. We are Group 1 and my name is Li Huiyu. My partner is Huang Jintai. Our topic today is aggregate planning from Chapter 11. We divided the presentation into two parts. I will introduce the first two sections for you, Introduction and Basic Strategies for Meeting Uneven Demand, which are about the definition of aggregate planning and the method we can use when encountering fluctuations. After that, my partner Huang Jintai will explain to you the last three sections, focusing on the techniques and applications of aggregate planning. Now let's begin with the introduction. Through this part, we can explain what aggregate planning is and how is it useful. Actually, aggregate planning is a kind of operational planning. In production operation management, planning methods can be divided into three types according to the time range: long-range planning, intermediate-range capacity planning, and short-range planning. Each planning method has its own unique characteristic and application scenarios. The long-range planning focuses on the strategic direction and resource allocation, and typically takes about 1 to 5 years or even longer. The short-range planning pays more attention to day-to-day operations and immediate needs, and it usually covers a period about 1 to 3 months or even shorter. But aggregate planning doesn't belong to either of these two methods. It is a kind of intermediate range capacity planning, focuses on adjusting production capacity to meet market demand over a medium-term horizon. Here I extract the key points from the reference book in this table. For aggregate planning, its time range is 2 to 12 months, or sometimes it may extend to 18. Then the applicable situations. Aggregate planning is particularly useful for companies or organizations that experience seasonal or other fluctuations in demand and capacity. The goal of aggregate planning is achieving a production plan that will effectively utilize the organization's resources to match expected demand. Finally, the applicable target is grouped products instead of individual product. That's why we call aggregate planning a big picture approach of planning. In fact, there are different types of aggregate planning. In daily life, companies will encounter changes in demand for various products due to lots of different reasons. At this time, we need to choose certain strategies to deal with it. So let's journey to the part 2, basic strategies for meeting uneven demand. Through this part, we can choose a more appropriate strategy for different types of products. Let's have a think first. As we all know, the same product may have uneven demand in the market over time. Here I will give a few examples of product types that are in high demand in daily life. The first type is agricultural products like corn, potatoes, apples, and so on. They are greatly affected by natural conditions such as weather and natural disasters. The second type is clothing. When fashion trends change, demand for certain styles or brands of clothing can suddenly increase, while demand for other styles can drop rapidly. The third type is electronic products. For example, in the early days of a new smartphone launch, demand increases dramatically and consumers are willing to pay a high price for it. And the fourth type is medical supplies. The demand for medical supplies is affected by seasonal changes, disease prevalence, and consumer health conditions. which may cause demand to vary significantly over time. Then how to solve them? With so many uneven demands, there are now 4 different strategies to choose from. The first two, maintain a level workforce and maintain a steady output rate, belong to the level capacity strategy. And the third one, match demand period by period, belongs to the chase demand strategy. And the last one is a combination of the previous 2 strategies. Now let's take a look at 2 calculation examples of different strategies from another reference book, Organization Management, to deepen your impression of aggregate planning. Level capacity strategy maintains a constant workforce and produces the same amount of product in each time period of the plan. So the first example shows how to calculate the number of employees needed to produce a specified output. There is a company called Wavetop. It currently employs 10 workers, and each worker produces 5 completed units per day. This results in a total daily output of 50 units. The company operates 5 days a week. If the company faces an average weekly demand of 500 units and plans to meet all of these demand using a level capacity strategy, the question is that how many employees are required to meet the average demand. To solve this question, the first step is to calculate the daily demand. The daily demand equals weekly demand divided by workdays per week. These 2 values, we can find it in our title. The weekly demand is 500 units here, and the workdays per week is here. So the daily demand is 500 divided by 5 equals 100 units per day. Then we need to know each employee's daily production. We can also find this value in our title. Here, each worker produces 5 completed units per day. So the last step is to calculate the number of employees required. The number equals daily demand divided by units per employee per day equals 100 divided by 5 equals 20 employees. Chase demand strategy. It produces exactly what is needed to satisfy demand during each period. The production rate changes in response to demand fluctuations. Example 2. Still the company Wavetop. It decides to adjust its capacity each month by hiring and firing employees to exactly match net monthly demand. This example shows how the workforce size fluctuates for the Wavetop company when a chase plan is used. In this example, each employee produces 500 units per month, and here are the monthly demands and additional info. January demand is 12,000 units, and inventory at the start is 6,000 units. So we can just calculate the net demand equals January demand minus the inventory at the start equals 6,000 units. The question is that assume that the monthly demand is given. Determine how many employees are needed each month from January to June to meet monthly net demand using the chase strategy. To solve this question, we can calculate the number of employees needed by dividing net demand by each employee's monthly output. For January, we have already calculated the net demand is 6,000 units. Besides, from the question, we know that the output of per employee per month is 500 units. We can find the value here, 500 units. So the employees we needed in January equals 6,000 divided by 500 equals 12 employees. If the demand in February is 9,000, similar to the calculation process for January, the number of employees needed for February is 9,000 divided by 500 equals 18 employees. Using this formula, we can also calculate the number of employees in other months. In March, we need to hire 24 employees. In April, we need to hire 30. In May, we need to hire 36. And in June, we need to hire 48. Now we can just put all of this data into this table. The first column is the months from January to June. The second column is the demand of each month. And the third column is the calculate results. The number of employees we need to hire each month. After these two examples, let's reanalyze some of the product types and choose appropriate strategies for them, such as medical supplies, like medicines and vaccines. Pharmaceutical companies usually use level capacity strategy to ensure a steady supply of drugs. Then the electronic products like smartphones. I believe that everyone knows the company Apple. Apple usually starts to gradually increase production a few months before the release of a new iPhone to cope with the high demand at the beginning of the release. So with chase demand strategy, company can cope with high demand at the initial launch and reduce losses caused by inventory backlogs at the same time. This is the content of these two sections. I hope you can have a basic understanding of the aggregate planning after listening. Now I would like to invite my partner to continue the presentation.
I will introduce about the technique for the aggregate planning. In these pictures, you can see that the aggregate planning are fall into one of two categories. They are the informal trial and error technique and the mathematical technique. About the trial and error technique, it is more frequencies to use in practice because it is very easy to understand. And about the mathematical technique, they are not frequencies to use because it is very difficult and it is always only used in the company research. So about the trial and error technique, they always use the graph and the spreadsheet to help us to analyze about the data. And about the mathematical technique, they are always use the numbers, the formulas, and the computer models to find the most efficiencies or cost efficiencies solution, or cost effective solution. This flowing chart is about the aggregate planning. In the first four graphs, you can see that this is need us to determine a lot of data, such as determine the demand of each period, determine capacity of each period, identify company or department's policies, and need us to determine unit cost for different times. So after that, we can get enough data to help us to analyze. Then we can, in the step 5, we can develop alternative plans and compute the cost of each. So before the step 6, we need to identify this alternative plan is the satisfactory plan or not. If this plan is not the satisfactory plan, then we will need to come back to step 5 to remake about the alternative plan. And here we will give you the example to help you understand about the trial and error technique. In this chart, we can see the number about the cost data, the capacities data, and the demands data. So we at here we can try to use the different strategy to analyze about the companies and give the different plans, help us to choose. In the plan 1 is using the level aggregate planning, and this plan will have the back orders. At first we need to calculate about the total demand. The total demand is need us to add the demand in the each pairs, so we can get the number is 14,400, and the average production rate needed is use the total demand to divide it with the pairs, so we can get the number about this. And about this graph, we can get the number about the employees product output per pairs, so we can know about that employees can product 20 productions in a pairs. So after that, we use the average production rate needed to divide it with the employees product output per pairs. Then we can know that in this company they need 90 employees in the plan 1. About the plan 2, he is trying to improve about the plan 1 and avoid about the back orders. It is still use about the level aggregate planning. In this plan, he is look at this 44 line. You can see he add about the cumulative demand to analyze. If the productivity is greater than the maximum demand, that will be avoid about the back orders. So analyze about this graph, we can see the maximum number about the cumulative demand is in the pairs 2. So this number is 2040. We use these numbers to divide it with the 20, then we can get in plan 2 the company need the 102 employers in the company. So after that we can calculate about the total cost in the plan 2 need, then it will help us to choose the plan. And in the plan 3, the chase aggregate planning is using the hiring and the firing. The number of the employees in the company is subject to change. So in this plan, we need to add about the hiring cost and the firing cost for these companies. About the plan 4, he is using the initial workforce and the overtimes as need. It means that he will not change about the initial workforce, and if necessary, they will need the employers to do the overtime work. So in this plan, the company needs to add the overtime labor cost to pay for this. So after that, we can get the data about this 4 plan and look at about the total cost. We can see the plan 4 is the best choice for these companies. So this is a trial and error technique to do. This is use the different strategies and trying to analyze about this. Then we will analyze about the different plan and choose about the best of choice. Okay, in the part 4, I will tell you about the knowledge about the aggregated planning in service. In aggregated planning in service is very different between the manufacturing, because if the company's product is the service, for example, if there are the hospitals, there are banks, or the hairstyles, the inventory is no longer available options. For example, this data in this graph, the data is about the telephone customer service companies. So this is aggregated. This is a service companies. So we can see that if there are productivities fail to meet demands, we have three choices for the companies. They are the recruiting enough staff, or overtime work when needed, and the last choice is adjust the number of employees according to the situations. So about these three choices, we can get the plan. In the first plan, we can use the level capacity strategy. This means that we need to recruit enough staff. Because the company is the service, give the product about the service, so they will not have the inventory. Because of this, we only need to focus on the maximum number about the service hour needed. That is in the period 5. The number is 11,040, and we use these numbers to divide it with the 160. Then we can get the, if you use the level capacity strategies, this company needs 69 staff to help them to give the service for the customers. So after that, we can calculate about the total cost to help us to choose the best choice. And about the hybrid aggregated planning, need the employers to do the overtime work. You can see only in the step 5, the employees need to do the overtime job. So you can only in the period 5, the company need to pay for the overtime labor cost. So I think this is a good choice for the companies. And about the chase aggregated planning, is need about using the hiring and firing. It means that the employees the company always adjusts the numbers of employees according to the situations. So because of this, the company need to pay for the hiring cost and the firing cost in the total cost. So after that, we can analyze about the data comparison. If we use the level aggregating planning, the total cost is 708810, and use the hybrid aggregated planning, the total cost is there. And if we use the chase aggregated planning, the total cost is lowest in between these three plans. So in these companies, if I'm the boss, I maybe choose about the chase aggregated planning. So we need to pay attention about this due to the inability for the service to maintain inventory and the significant fluctuations in demands. So it is important to pay attention to this point when designing an aggregate planning in service. So in the last point, I will introduce about disaggregations, the aggregate planning. We cannot just use the aggregate planning in the companies, because if we only have the aggregate planning, we don't know how to use, how many productions we need to make, how many materials we need to buy. So we need to do the disaggregations, and then we can get the master schedules. That is the result is the master production schedules. This is a plan that shows exactly what product will be made, how many, and when they will be produced. So the disaggregation is very important in the process of the aggregate planning. So after that, we will finish our presentations. I will give you a consumption about this. At first, we are examining what aggregate planning is, and then we show about the different production strategy should be chosen, and just like the level capacity strategies, the chase demand strategies, and so on. And in the part 3, I am introduced about the technical for the aggregate planning and give you an example to know how to make the plan for the companies. And in the part 4, I am telling you about we need to pay attention at here when we need to make aggregate planning for the service companies. And in the last part, I am telling you about the disaggregations about the aggregate planning. So this is end for our speech. Thank you for listening.